Hi, my name is Jim Graham. I'm the Chief Investigator with the Iowa Board of Medicine, and this is a lecture on ethics. It's called the ethical dilemma, ethics outside the box, because it's not a lecture on typical ethics like medical ethics. It's a lecture about ethical behavior and how we as public service employees can at times get ourselves in trouble. I first became interested in ethics when I was in graduate school. And I had heard from prior students that this ethical ethics for public service workers um, was a good class because it fulfilled the requirement of my graduate program. And as long as you could justify your position, there was no wrong answer. And so that, of course, intrigued me. And so I signed up and took the class. So our first day of class, our professor stood up there. His name was Professor Mark Cronin. And I will preface this by saying I was definitely the old guy in class. I had come from a public service background. I had worked in public service ever since I was 18 years old. I was involved in EMS and then eventually became a paramedic and then became a police officer. And so now in my 30s, when I went back to school later, now in my 30s, I was definitely the old guy in this classroom. And so Professor Mark Cronin stood up there in front of the class and he said, "There is no right, there is no wrong, there is only justification." And by that, he meant that as long as you could justify an answer to something, as long as you could justify an action, then there was no wrong answer. And he gave this example of a colleague of his who was at a museum opening, and he had at this museum opening they had served alcohol, and his babysitter had called him and said, "Hey, your son, your young son is injured. I think he needs to go to the hospital. I think he maybe has a dislocated elbow, maybe a broken arm." And so his colleague jumps in his car and takes off driving and ends up blowing through a red light and strikes and kills a passenger in a vehicle who happened to be a 12-year-old girl. And Professor Cronin said that in that person's world, that he was able to justify driving, even though he was knew that he had been consuming alcohol and was over the legal limit, but that his son was injured at home, and so although there was tragic consequences, he was able to justify his actions. And you know, through some legal maneuvering, was able to work himself out of not only the OWI but also out of a vehicular homicide charge, and through some counseling was able to get over this tragic event. Well, thank God for that, huh? And he also brought up another example of a when he was in his own graduate program, how he had worked with inner city gang youth, and that in the world of these gangbangers, dragging a mother out of a car and carjacking her at gunpoint was survival, and that those actions could be therefore justified. And so in their world, that wasn't a wrong thing to do. It was simply survival. And so if you're able to justify it, then it's not wrong. So as Professor Cronin was saying this, I couldn't believe it. I was looking around at all of these early 20-year-olds that were in their graduate program, and they were all shaking their head like this was completely acceptable, and they understood exactly what was being said, and they were buying it hook, line, and sinker. And so I raised my hand, and I, of course, was sitting down toward the front because that's what old guys do. Sitting down toward the front, and Professor Cronin called on me, and I said, "How long were you a police officer?" And he got this strange look on his face, and he said, "Well, I was never a police officer. I attended UCLA Berkeley from the time I was in my undergrad all the way up through my doctorate, and I did work with inner city gang youth, and I did some work with the police, but I was never actually a police officer." And so as he continues his speech about justification, I raise my hand a second time, and he picks on me, and I said, firefighter, paramedic, anything, anything in public service. How long did you work in public service? And again, he gives me this spiel about UCLA, Berkeley, and his work with inner city gang youth, which I later found out was in the form of questionnaires, no actual physical contact with any inner city gang youth at all. And so he continues on with his talking about justification and living in different worlds, and not everyone has the same thought process when it comes to justifying their actions. And so I raised my hand a third time, and he gave me this look like my wife often gives me when she's frustrated with me, rolls his eyes and kind of sighs, and he's like, "Yes." And I said, "How long have you been delusional? Because there is no justification for killing a young girl in a motor vehicle accident, driving intoxicated, and there's no justification for ever dragging someone out of their vehicle and carjacking them." And the problem we have here is that Professor Cronin, like a lot of our college professors out there, they've never faced out a bad guy. Never. His inner city gang youth was through the form of returning questionnaires that were probably handed out by bachelor students that they're the ones that probably actually had to go out on the street and find these gangbangers and give them questionnaires and ask that they be returned. And there's no justification for driving impaired and killing a young girl, and he's never had to drag a young girl like that out of a vehicle and try to breathe life back into her. My agency that I came from, Dallas County Sheriff's Office in Dallas County, Iowa, we've had our own run-ins with ethical dilemmas. Up there in the top left-hand corner, that was our one-time sheriff, Brian Gilbert. Brian Gilbert was involved in a traffic stop while he was sitting sheriff, involved in a traffic stop that was made by one of our deputies, a BMW Roadster on Interstate 80, that there was $100,000 packed into the doors of this BMW. The money was seized. It was loaded into the back of Sheriff Gilbert's pickup. Unbeknownst to him, the deputies that were out there had already counted the bundles of cash, and when they got back to the sheriff's office from which Brian had transported it, they realized that there was several bundles of cash missing. They brought their concerns up with Sheriff Gilbert, and he told them they didn't know what they were talking about and they just needed to let it go. Well, they did not let it go because they were a very ethical group of deputies, and they reported it to their detective, who then reported it to the Department of Criminal Investigation, which later on led to Brian Gilbert being impeached from office and being charged with first-degree theft and convicted of first-degree theft. And this was our sitting sheriff. This was our leadership at the time. Up there in the right-hand corner, the gentleman in the sheriff's office attire that's on the left side of the suspect there, that was Deke Glean. that was our jail administrator. About this same time, Deke was providing favors inside the jail. He was uncertified. Is uncertified. He was a civilian in charge of the jail, providing sexual favors for things like ramen noodles and phone cards. And I'm not sure where you're at in life if you're accepting ramen noodles in payment of sex favors, but I guess that's exactly what was going on. So several complainants came forward, and he ended up getting convicted and went to prison for his ramen noodle and phone card incident. Down there on the bottom, that's Kevin Hines. He was a jailer for us. Was also engaged in sex acts, forcible sex acts with a prisoner who had come in for public intoxication. And he was also subsequently arrested and charged and also did time in prison, is now on the sex offender registry, as is Deke Glean. In the span of my first 5 years at the sheriff's office, not only did we lose the sheriff and our jail administrator and the jailer, Kevin Hines there, we lost 5 certified deputies to ethical violations. And it was just not a good time to be a deputy with the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. This next wording comes directly out of our uh, policy and procedure manual, our bylaws at the Sheriff's Office at Dallas County. Will behave in a manner that does not bring discredit to the agency or themselves. Character and conduct while off duty must be exemplary, thus maintaining a position of respect and community respect in the community in which he or she lives and serves. And then finally, personal behavior must be beyond reproach. I'll bet you, any of you who look in your bylaws somewhere, there will be wording similar to this. And I especially want you to pay close attention to the while off duty, because that means that even your time off truly isn't your time off. And also, the behavior must be beyond reproach. A lot of people don't understand what that means, but if you look it up, that literally means being perfect, being with above questioning, so that no one can ever dare question your behavior in any way. And I don't know about you, but I I make mistakes like everybody else, and sometimes my mouth runs faster than my head, and I have certainly done and said things that would not put me in that category of being beyond reproach. So, as I said when we started, this uh, lecture isn't about your typical ethics. It's about things that we do as employees that can get us into trouble. So let's talk about sex in the workplace. This statistics comes from the American Sex Survey. 54% of Americans admit to having some type of sexual relations in the workplace during work hours. Now, you look at the term sexual relations, and what exactly does that mean? Well, they don't really define it well, saying, well, it means anything, is it oral sex? Is it actual full on sex? Is it harmless touching? Is it touching of the genitals? What exactly is sexual relations? Well, reading through the entire study, um, and again, it doesn't come right out and define it well, but what it does, reading through the entire study, it is more than simple harmless flirting. It's actual something that probably your significant other, your spouse, whatever, would not be happy with you doing. It's beyond that harmless flirting. It's more than a simple touch on the shoulder, a touch on the hand. It's something that would be considered sexually inappropriate if someone witnessed it. This comes from another study that's called Gender Issues and Partner Preferences Among EMTs. In a survey of 6,200 EMS workers, 60% of them, or 3,844, admitted to having some type of sexual liaison with a coworker while on duty at some point in a career. And inevitably, as often as I have done this lecture for EMS providers, emergency medical service providers, EMTs, paramedics, firefighters, I inevitably get someone to come up to me. Someone will come up to me and say, only 62%. I'm actually surprised it's that low. I thought it would be much higher. So here's a good example of uh, sex in the workplace in a public service setting. This is Polk County Fire and Rescue, Polk County, Florida. So located on the far left there, that is Battalion Chief uh, Trampus Fletcher, and he's the one in the pink shirt there. In the middle there, that's EMS Supervisor Shelley Crockless, and then on the right there is another EMS Supervisor, Michael Tomlinson. And then on the far side there, listed, that's Deputy Chief Michael Coate. So um, Shelley was engaged in actual sexual relations on duty with Trampus Fletcher and Michael Tomlinson. And I don't think at the same time. I think it was, she was engaged in sex at different times with these two. Um, with Deputy Chief Michael Coate, there was sexually related text messages being exchanged back and forth between she and the deputy chief, and including pictures. Now, problem being is not only is this happening, but big problem is that this is the leadership. This is the outright leadership of Polk County Fire Rescue. And so these are the people that are setting the standards for the workers. So Shelley, the text messages she was exchanging back and forth, Polk County issued cell phones to all of these people. So the text messages were coming from a work cell phone. So another problem there. Not only is it happening on duty, but it's happening with company property. Um, Shelley, the way this whole thing came out, her boyfriend was a Polk County deputy, and he thought something was up. So he ended up installing some software on that cell phone where when a text message was sent or received, it was also sent and received to his phone as well. And so realized that there was text messages and talk of sexual liaisons and pictures being exchanged back and forth, wiener pictures and breast pictures and all that type of thing, being exchanged back and forth. And so rather than go to the the chief there, the fire chief, he did one better. He went to the media, and the media broke this story. And so Trampus Fletcher, Shelley Crockless, and Michael Tomlinson, they all lost their jobs. They are no longer employed with Polk County Fire Rescue. Deputy Chief Michael Coate, he just bought some time off and was demoted and embarrassed and ruined his marriage. So I'm not sure how many people are out there are familiar with things that happen in Iowa, but uh, there's a thing in Iowa that's really big. People come from all over the United States and then also out of the country. It's called RAGBRAI, and it's this bike ride across Iowa where they'll ride 50 to 70 miles a day, and then they'll stop in a town and party it up. And well, it just so happens on a few years ago they stopped in Dallas County, and in particular, a community called Perry. And so, helping Perry PD out, I was doing a walkthrough of a bar that was packed with people, and uh, one of the magistrates, one of the judges in our county, came running up to me, intoxicated. I'm in uniform, and she has a bumper sticker across the chest of her very low cut shirt that's from this Team Cockroach. It says "I love cock," and she's drunk and speaking very loudly, and it made me uncomfortable because she's drawing attention to us. And so I backed my way out of the bar, and at which point she followed me, and we got outside, and she said, "Hey, I I was trying to get your phone number the other day." And so I told her, "Well, magistrate," her name was Magistrate Waller. I said, "Well, Magistrate Waller, um, if if you want our phone number, the sheriff's office, they issue us cell phones, and dispatch can provide you with that phone number if you needed something." And I said, "Was it a case, or what exactly did you need?" And she said, "No, no, 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 it wasn't a case. I was just looking for someone to take me out." And I said, "I don't think that's a good idea, magistrate," emphasizing magistrate. And she said, "Oh, yeah, it'll be fine." And I said, "I don't think it will be. People find things like this out." And she said, "No, no, no one will find this out. It'll all be fine." And so about that time, another deputy pulled up, and I made my way to my car. Well, one thing led to another, and I'm not sure why this. I still to this day don't really know why this came this way, but she had gotten my actual cell phone number, my personal cell phone number, from a jail employee that she was friends with, and she sent me a text message threatening me that if I ever told anybody about this, that um, I would never win a case in her courtroom again. That is not something I could let go. So I contacted my sheriff, who contacted the district court judge that was in charge through Fifth Judicial, that was in charge of all the magistrates, and it went to ethics committee, and she lied. She lied and said that I was the one that actually came on to her. Although, thank God, I had these text messages that she had sent me threatening me, and she ended up getting disbarred for a couple of years. This is New Mexico State Trooper Bert Lopez, 2010 Trooper of the Year for the state of New Mexico. These were still pictures that were caught at a DNR park, Department of Natural Resources park there in New Mexico, where Trooper Lopez was having a rendezvous with a female. I guess that's one way to get out of a ticket. The DNR that captured these photos on this camera, on this pole camera, they didn't contact New Mexico State Police. They went to the media. And so, seeing this, New Mexico State Police investigated this, and they couldn't tell exactly what trooper it was. So they put out a departmental wide mandate saying, "We are investigating this. If someone comes forward and tells us who did this, who this was, and explains themselves, we'll work with you, and we won't there'll be, it'll limit the disciplinary action." Well, Trooper Lopez stepped forward and said, "It was me. It was a girlfriend." And New Mexico State Police said, "You know what? We're just kidding. You're fired." And Trooper Lopez tried to fight it, and it was upheld that that this was an ethical violation. And even though he was Trooper of the Year, he was terminated. Here we have Phoenix Police Officer Jeff Gordon. He was a 2012 Medal of Honor recipient there in Phoenix for courage under fire. In a very similar situation, Officer Gordon had come off a stint with Vice, which he had lots of contact with prostitutes, and he began engaging in sexual liaisons with some of these working girls that he had met through Vice when he'd come back to patrol. Well, that kind of got out, and people talk, and it got back to Phoenix PD, and Phoenix PD investigated it, and Officer Gordon admitted to his liaisons, and but through the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association, through plea, they were able to show that all of these liaisons took place while Officer Gordon was on his lunch break. And so, therefore, the city said, okay, well, he was on lunch, and I guess that's his time to do with what he wants, and he got a slap on the wrist. It also probably didn't hurt that at the time, his father was the mayor of Phoenix. So here's a few more interesting statistics. First one coming from, again, the American Sex Survey, where 75% of Americans feel like consensual sex in the office should not lead to termination if it is a first-time offense. Comparatively speaking, look at the second study there. 93% of Americans polled felt that public service workers, police, fire, and EMS, who engage in sex on duty should be terminated. Well, what's the difference there? Why is it so different uh, for public service workers? If it's a one-time thing and it happens, it shouldn't lead to the average American, it shouldn't lead to termination. But with there's such a wide disparity there with public service workers who should be terminated. Why is there such a big difference? Well, here's the answer to that question. Three things came through glowingly as the reason why it's different. The first one came down to money. We are paying you with public service funds. There is no way you should be engaged in anything other than public service business with our money. The second one is trust. How can we trust you to properly respond when you're engaged in a sex act? How can we trust you to treat us right and do the right thing when you're having sexual liaison, possibly cheating on a spouse, and being untrustworthy? How can we trust you with our money in this position? And the third one was preparedness. Um, are you going to be able to properly respond to a call if you are otherwise indisposed, engaged in some type of sexual relationship? Well, having the opportunity to travel around the country at different times and lecture at EMS conferences, I decided to kind of do my own study as to why this is happening. Why take the risk? Why run the risk of being caught at work, of being terminated, of being disciplined, of being losing your family at home? And so I would say to people at these EMS conferences on breaks and things, hey, have you ever had sex on duty? And inevitably, I would always get this look, man, I appreciate the offer, but that's not going to happen. And so I would have to explain to them, no, 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 that's not what I'm talking about. I'm trying to do a blind survey. Your name will never be used, about why this is happening. Why do this? Have you ever done it? And if you have, why? And overwhelmingly, the answer I got, first and foremost, was availability. For God's sakes, we're working 24-hour shifts. They give us the equipment right there. They give us beds. We have sleep rooms that are private. There's the back of the ambulance that has a cot, and it is available. It's available to us. Now, the sleep room, I guess I can somewhat understand. The cot, I have done some horrific things, had to do some horrific things that have taken place on those ambulance cots. And maybe I'm just a little germ phobic. I'm not sure, but there is no way I would personally lie down, even fully clothed, on the back of one of those ambulance cots, disinfected or not. Okay, availability continued with, and I'm not sure other branches of you know public service, but I will tell you that with policing and fire, there's an attraction to the uniform. You can take a person who in regular street clothes might look like, just the average person, and you put them in a uniform, and there, for whatever reason, there is an appeal to them. Um, and there's a term that goes with that. It's called a badge bunny. And whether they're male or female, there's an attraction to that badge, an attraction to that uniform. The uh, fire tattoo you see there. So I was on Interstate 80, and I pulled up on a vehicle that was broken down and began talking to a female, and she was telling me that her father had been a firefighter in Topeka, Kansas, and she had loved firemen and always wanted to be on the fire department, but had never been able to pass the test to be a firefighter. And so, as we're in this conversation, and I had called for a wrecker for a car, in this conversation, she says, since I was never able to get inside Topeka Fire, I decided to let Topeka Fire inside me. And I kind of paused, trying to think about what exactly she meant. And she says, and so she showed me this Topeka Fire tattoo that she had. And she then said, I keep track of all the Topeka firemen that I've ever had sex with. And she shows me this tattoo she has here on the back of her neck. Knowing that no one would probably ever believe me, ever believe that this happened, I asked her, is there any way you would allow me to take a picture of this, just so I have this documented? And she was more than happy to let me take a photograph of it. Another answer I got was that it's just part of the lifestyle. It's what we do. It's what police officers do. It's what firefighters do. It's available. It's just what we do. It's part of living on the edge. We uh, go to work and it's chaos, and so why not bring that excitement and that chaos into our personal lives? Of all the answers I got, this one rang home the closest to me. Understanding in tragedy. We are grief mops, first responders, investigators, police officers, uh, all of that. We are forced to look into things and hear things and do things that nobody else does. And how many of us can go home and talk to someone in our household about the horrible things that we've had to do and hear about and see and investigate? Well, um, not many of us. Not many of us have that understanding. But you know who does that has that understanding is other people at work. And so that draws us together. It pulls us in, and we're able to relate on a very personal level to people that we would about nothing else that anyone would understand, and it pulls us in, and before we know it, we are engaged in a physical relationship. Speaking along the lines of the grief mop and understanding in tragedy, I throw this in here just uh, as a reference point of maybe what we should be doing and should be thinking about in the future. This comes from a study called The Psychological Impact of Disaster on Rescue Personnel. And it says it is estimated that the savings in medical care on lost work hours would be millions per year if agencies would take a more proactive approach to dealing with both acute and long term stressors. So, what that means is forcing the issue. If someone is involved in some type of acute stressor, we force help into the situation, whether they think they need it or not. At the sheriff's office with our new sheriff, uh, I was lucky uh, in this aspect because the tragedies I had been through on the job, I was forced to go in and talk about them before I could return to duty. And the one particular incident where I was shot at and almost hit me in my big round melon. Um, that uh, I, I was forced to go in and talk about all the things all my concerns and all my worries, and I didn't lose face. I didn't None of my coworkers could say, "Oh, he can't take it. He's cracking up. He's going to counseling," because I was able to just fall back on the excuse that yeah, I'm being forced to do this, even though, um, as it turns out, I truly needed it. Okay, let's talk about complaints and dealing with complaints about employees, not by employees, but against employees. Two of my favorite complaints I ever had against me, and law enforcement, we took a lot of complaints. The first one was on an OWI, operating while intoxicated, where I arrested the male half of a vehicle, and the female half, who was a passenger, was also intoxicated. And I told her to remain in the vehicle and make some phone calls. She was very belligerent to me, and she ended up getting out of the car. So I thought, okay, well, problem solved. I told you to stay in the car, so now you're going to jail for public intox, and I can just tow the vehicle rather than wait for a ride. Well, inside that vehicle was a miniature pinscher whose name was Bonkers. And so I had asked, the woman, "Hey, is your dog friendly?" And she assured me that it was. And so I took Bonkers and I put him in the front seat, and I had called our local pound that they had a place for Bonkers to stay for the night. So Bonkers was going to jail too. And um, as we're driving in, I'm Bonkers is just excited to be going for a car ride. He's in the front seat with me, and uh, my arrestees are in the back seat, and the female is yelling at me because I'm petting Bonkers, trying to calm him down, and she's yelling at me the whole time, "Get your pig hands off my dog! Get your pig hands off my dog!" And so, and of course, dogs they don't know a lot about inertia, and so when I would turn a corner, Bonkers kind of fell over into my lap, and I pushed him back into his side of the seat. And so she came in the next day and filed a complaint against me that I had shoved her dog. And so the chief deputy called me in, and he's like, "Deputy Graham, are you shoving dogs?" And so I had to explain that, well, no, but kind of yes, I did shove a dog. And he said, so he told me right then and there, just stay out of my office, avoid complaints, please. Just do your job and try to avoid getting complained on. Well, that next night, uh, I got called to a car versus deer accident. And the woman was very, very upset, is out on a gravel road, that she had struck this deer, and the deer had crawled out into a field and with broken legs, and she was just beside herself that she had injured this deer. Didn't care about her car; she was more worried about the deer. So I walked out into this field, and um, mind you, this is 4 o'clock in the morning. It's still dark out, and I see this deer. He's trying to crawl away from me with broken legs, and and she thinks I'm going to take this deer to a vet, and I'm telling her, I'm not here to help the deer, right? I'm here just to put the deer down. You understand that, right? So she's crying and crying, and so she walks out with me. And now let me preface this by saying I am not a marksman. I am not the greatest shot in the world. But the closer I got to this deer, the more it crawled away, and so I knew I was going to have to take a shot from a ways away. But there is a farm pond that's it's crawling toward, and I thought, well, great. Now, not only the deer is going to have broken legs, but he's going to drown on top of it. So I pull my sidearm out and I aim and bang, I fire, and I think I might have come close to him, but I may have grazed him, but what I definitely did is I shot a duck. And ducks fly up off of this pond, and she is screaming, "Oh my God, you shot a duck! You shot a duck!" And I did get him with a second shot, but she came and filed a complaint against me that not only did I not help this injured deer, but I had executed a duck as well. Let's take a look at a couple findings from a couple different studies on complaints with public service. The first one comes from complaints against the police predicting dispositions. And they found that it is without a doubt that simply by its very nature, public service will generate complaints. It is imperative that supervision take all factors into account when assessing the reasonability of a complaint. Is it reasonable? Is this something that could have actually happened? The second one comes from incident, source, and nature of complaints received in emergency medical systems. In a 3-year study involving several EMS agencies and over 1/2 million patient contacts, the rate of complaints generated were received at a rate of about 1 per 12,000 contacts. So in reality, that's really good. 1 per 12,000 contacts. Now, I know it's not that way for the police. Law enforcement gets lots more complaints simply by their job and the nature, their scope of their job. But with EMS workers, they're doing a pretty good job at generating few complaints. Speaking of complaints, here in Iowa, we have something that's called a Peace Officer's Bill of Rights. And I haven't gone to the trouble of looking up how many states have a Peace Officer's Bill of Rights and how many don't. But California was actually the first state that said peace officers should be afforded due process, meaning that when someone complains about them and says that something happened, it should be investigated just like if it was a regular citizen. And a complaint shouldn't be held just on the fact that it was said it happened. It should be held on the provable merits, and that they should be afforded due process through this investigation rather than just saying, well, the public said it happened and it happened. And here in Iowa, we signed that into bill several years ago that when a complaint is made against a peace officer, there is a process that it has to go through, meaning that the complainant has to write that complaint down in affidavit form. That way, if it's investigated and found to be false, that is now a false report to a law enforcement agency, and that person, that the complainant, can be arrested if they make a false report. With that Peace Officer's Bill of Rights here in Iowa, this is what it means to be an officer that is covered under our Peace Officer's Bill of Rights. It means any certified law enforcement officer, firefighter, emergency medical technician, corrections, detention, jail, probation, parole, communications, or any other law enforcement officer certified by Iowa Law Enforcement Academy and employed by a municipality, county, or state agency. So we have included everybody in this, which is a good thing. So this next study gives us some statistics and reference complaints. It comes from incident, source, and nature of complaints received in emergency medical systems, and it says the largest category of complaints involve rudeness or unprofessional conduct, something that is easily correctable. 34% easily correctable. Only 6% involved actual patient care. The largest number of complaints didn't even come from the patient themselves. It came from families. 42% came from family members, with being the complainants, and only 7% came from other healthcare providers, meaning that an ER or a physician or whoever didn't think that the care was appropriate. This next study, incident source of nature complaint received in emergency medical systems. Across the board, the level of complaints a service receives tends to be directly impacted by three things. Number one is the age of the provider. The younger the provider, the less experience, the more complaints they generate. Number two is the time of day. I know I'm definitely a lot more grumpy in the middle of the night after being woken up than in the middle of the day when I'm already up and got several cups of coffee in me. My tolerance level goes up significantly. And the number three is the number of prior transports. How many times has this provider seen this patient? How many times have they dealt with this very same complaint, this very same thing? So what can we learn from these studies and these statistics in reference to complaints? Well, the first thing is there has to be a balancing act between customer service and realistic expectations. I'm sure you've all heard the saying that the customer is always right. Well, in this case, they're not always right. We have to be realistic with our employees. What could they have done better? What were the circumstances of each individual situation? We can't just lump everything into one, and we have to be realistic about the interaction that our employees are having with the public. And then secondly is actions, be they good or bad, should be dealt with on the provable merits of the incident, with emphasis on provable. So uh, one of the complaints that I addressed about me with our chief deputy, he said that I used or that the complainant said that I had used some profanity when I was dealing with them, which definitely was not the case. And so he was saying, well, it's not on recording. You were inside the house and your body mic didn't reach that far. And this is what they said. And my response was, well, so let me give you this example. Let's say that someone came in and they said, "Hey, Deputy Graham, he saved 35 people today. He rushed into a bus that had flipped over and was on fire, and he drugged 35 people to safety." And you, as the chief deputy, brought me in and said, "Deputy Graham, did you save 35 people? Because we didn't hear anything about this." And I said, "No, I don't have any idea what you're talking about." What would your response be? Would you say, "Well, that's what the public said. You're getting a Medal of Honor. Even though you don't know anything about it, you're getting a Medal of Honor for this"? Well, of course you wouldn't say that. Why is it so easy to accuse us and believe something bad versus accuse us and believe us of something good? It's the exact same situation. Okay, finally, let's talk about the great evil that has crept into our public service world, social media. Each one of these three pictures were taken of a public service worker who ended up being terminated because of their actions. The first one there, down the gentleman there holding the mixed drink, um, off duty but still in his uniform, stops by a party, is drinking, and someone snaps a picture, pops it up on social media, and he ends up getting terminated. The second one, the female up there in the corner, also a police officer um, in Arizona, also off duty, uh, and contends that she had not actually taken any alcohol. It was a posed picture, but was also was photographed and posted on social media, and public saw it, and she was disciplined for it. And the third one there, that is a firefighter who full-time firefighter who was involved in a car wash that was represented by the fire department. Was off duty at the time, but was it was a charity car wash. Became intoxicated and was subsequently arrested. And this is a photo of him there, and he was also terminated. So the very first case that ever really came to light with public service uh, and social media came in 2006. September, suspect Gary Waters was arrested in New York City on a stolen motorcycle carrying a handgun. And this is the arresting officer, NYPD officer Vaughn Atine. Officer Atine arrested this subject, and during the arrest, Waters struggled and subsequently got three broken ribs out of it. He claimed that Atine beat him, and to justify the beating, he actually planted the gun on him. And as far as a stolen motorcycle goes, I don't really know what his excuse was for that, but the actual the gun was planted to justify the beating. Waters' attorney was able to access uh, Officer Atine's MySpace account, and I don't even know if MySpace still even exists, but at the time it was a big thing. His MySpace account, for which the night of the arrest he had listed his mood as devious, there in quotation marks, and that he had watched the movie Training Day to brush up on police procedure. Well, for those of you who have seen Training Day, it is about this very thing. It is about dirty police officers going outside the law to make arrests and convictions, and um, that's what he had listed on his own social media account that he used to brush up on police procedure. At the end of this case, Waters was subsequently found innocent by a jury, and the officer was disciplined after internal review of the case. Now, he bought a week off. That's what he got, a week off without pay, um, for his lack of judgment. Even though the prosecuting attorney's office for the city of New York fully blamed the loss of the case on that MySpace account, um, it kind of died right there without any further policy on what officers put out there in their private life. Not learning from others' mistakes right there in the city of New York. The next big case we have also came out of New York involving social media and a public service worker. 2009, EMT Mark Musarella, working for Richmond University Medical Center, posted crime scene photos of Carolyn Wilmer on Facebook. Uh, Carolyn was the victim of a violent crime in which Mark responded in and decided to go ahead and snap some pictures and uploaded those pictures to his Facebook page right there from the crime scene. Subsequently, because of this, Mozzarella was fired. He pled guilty to simple official misconduct, which was 200 hours of community service, and his EMT license was revoked there in New York State. In March 2011, Miss Wimmer's parents filed a lawsuit against Mozzarella personally, who now is without a job, Richmond University Medical Center, FDNY Fire Commissioner Salvatore Cassano, the FDNY itself, Facebook, and Greenlee Farms, the handgun, the seller of the handgun, and then also the West Brighton complex where she was slain, and also Calvin Lawson, who was convicted of her murder. Well, you look at this and who's going to pay for this? Well, it sure isn't going to be Mozzarella, who is without a job. So that was all broken down between Richmond University Medical Center, FDNY, who took on that responsibility for the fire commissioner, and Greenlee Farms didn't pay a dime. The West Brighton complex, well, that's not really their fault. They didn't pay a dime. And Facebook, well, they've got more money than they know what to do with, and so they could tie this up forever in court. So they didn't pay a dime either. Still not learning from their mistakes, 2013, the New York Post ran a story detailing several online posts on social media made by EMS workers who had taken photos of patients and placed them on their accounts. You can see an example down there where a lieutenant with the New York City EMS fire department posted a picture down there of a woman in a wheelchair where they had superimposed wide load onto the back of her wheelchair. So in a knee-jerk response to now yet another problem involving New York and their public service workers and social media, they came out with a mandate that said no cell phones were allowed for any reason on duty. Now, they didn't even just say personal cell phones. They said no cell phones. Well, the problem with that being is that's taken away a big chunk of how people communicate, meaning calling into the hospitals with patient reports. It's not the old days. We don't do that on the radio anymore. So simply by doing their job and calling in reports to the hospital as part of mandate for their job, they were violating their own cell phone policy. Here's an interesting case that 2010 that came out of Austin, Texas. He was a firefighter, Alejandro Garza. posted nude photos of himself on a social media website. Now, this wasn't like a Facebook. This was a dating type website, and I'm not really familiar with what website it was, but there was nude photos of him out there. Someone also on that dating website recognized Alejandro as a firefighter and made a formal complaint to the Austin Fire Department. They made an investigation, and he was fired for conduct unbecoming after the pictures were discovered. Now, on this website, there was nothing linking him to the fire department. He had never claimed that he was an Austin firefighter. It was just simply the fact that he had posted nude photos of himself on this website. After he was terminated, uh, the union took the case to an independent arbitrator who ended up siding with the city, saying that there was an expectation of conduct and that he had violated that conduct, blatantly violated that conduct, and he was outside of conduct unbecoming. Garza attempted to file a federal lawsuit for discrimination, but the case was dismissed in summary judgment because the court ruled the city was clear in its expectations of firefighters, and the conduct had nothing to do with any type of discrimination with race, sex, anything like that might fall under a discriminatory lawsuit. The courts have held time and time again that code of conduct is interpretive. It is and it is interpretive by not only the courts but by the employer. It is retroactive, so it doesn't matter if you do something and it's not discovered for several years. They can go back and apply it retroactively, and it is applicable both on and off duty because of the general way that the code of conduct is written in conduct unbecoming. It is applicable both on and off duty. Right here, this is the wave of the future, and more agencies are doing this very thing. This comes from the Broward County Sheriff's Office. It says this is their policy on social media. Although the Broward County Sheriff's Office respects the privacy of our officers, it must also balance the code of conduct for the greater good of those we serve. Social media has become a gateway for the sharing of information that is monitored by citizens, victims, criminals, and the media alike. It is for this reason that the Sheriff's Office mandates that those officers with social media accounts allow full access in the officer's presence when requested by supervisory staff. If they refuse, it is grounds for immediate termination. I'm going to leave you with a quote that came from someone that I respected above almost anyone else I've ever met, and it was Gunnery Sergeant Coons that was one of my infantry instructors in the Marine Corps. And Gunny Coons said, "The right thing and the popular thing are rarely born from the same mother." And what he meant by that is doing what's right will not make you popular, but doing what's right will make you a good Marine, and it will make you a good person.